All right, it's running.
All right, I'm going to get started. My name is James. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Control Board, and today is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024, and I call this meeting to order. I have a few opening remarks before we turn to the agenda. First, I needed to make a technical correction to a notice that we sent out as part of our weekly update email on September 16th. We've been fielding a number of questions, primarily from retailers who had been solicited by out-of-state hemp manufacturers and companies asking if they could carry their intoxicating hemp-derived products on their shelves. So in that email, we said that purchasing and selling hemp-derived THC products is a violation of CCB Rule 2.17. And while that is correct, it left out an important detail that products with hemp-derived content that are duly registered with the CCB as a regulated cannabis product are exempt from that 2.173A rule. So it's through that registration process that we check to make sure that those products meet all of our health and safety requirements, the same standard that every Vermont manufacturer is held to. I know it's a technical yet very important distinction, and I apologize for any confusion that may have caused. We're also about to post an updated request for consulting services, which I think needs to be posted to the BGS website. That's Building and General Services website, but we'll either link to that posting or put the posting on our website as well. So anyone can respond to that. The scope of work that we're seeking includes updating our market analysis, including some scenario planning if conditions on the ground, either at the state or federal level, change significantly. We're also looking for strategies to better support small cannabis businesses, reduce regulatory burden, and streamline our internal processes. So that should be up hopefully by the end of the week. And then, anyone who's taking a look at our agenda for today, you'll see that we're going to be discussing and potentially voting to temporarily close the application process for new cultivation and retail licenses. This would be a dramatic shift in policy, but for those who have been watching our work and experience of the other adult use states with uncapped licensing around the country, this shouldn't be a terribly surprising development. Given that we have public comment next, I wanted to provide a brief primer on the decision to include this item on the agenda. So on the retail side, the board has been voicing its concern about retail density in certain areas of the state for at least a year now. We know that the unnatural distribution of retail outlets is the inevitable outcome of the legislature's decision to disallow retail in towns that haven't proactively voted to allow. We're now 2 years into retail sales, just about 2 years, and I don't see much appetite to revisit that opt-in, opt-out presumption in the legislature. However, the legislature earlier this year did recognize retail density as a problem and gave the board the undesirable task of developing rules around the siting of new retail establishments. So the one thing that we don't want to happen is for there to be a rush into these already saturated markets while we're debating these new rules, which would further exacerbate this known problem. I can anticipate, and in fact, we're seeing that prospective retailers are wanting to roll the dice with being the 6th or 7th retailer in a more populated area like Rutland, rather than being the first retailer in a less populated area like Newberry. So that's the basic rationale for why we wanted to put this on the agenda. We will flesh out more of the arguments for and against this after public comment. But if we decide to pause, I truly believe that it will be temporary, just long enough to chart a more permanent path forward on retail siting. And I think whatever we do with respect to retail siting, it's going to have to include some strategies to serve those smaller markets like a Newberry, whose downtown consists only of a general store and probably will never be able to sustain a standalone cannabis retailer. When it comes to the temporary pause on new cultivation licenses, I think it's fair to say that this is not a decision that the board takes lightly. So much of our work over the past 3.5 years has been grounded in reducing barriers to entering this market and encouraging participation by legacy operators and small farmers. And I'm sure there's plenty more of you out there on the sidelines that will be impacted by this decision. The truth is, though, that if we continue to license cultivators with reckless abandon and supply and demand tilts way out of balance, we not only do real harm to smaller cultivators to the benefit of larger operators, we also create perverse incentives to divert legal cannabis to illicit markets. Again, this isn't a new conversation. Majority of states cap their cultivation licenses from the outset. And the ones that don't have implemented production management strategies or outright moratoriums on new licenses to deal with this basic oversupply issue. When we first estimated the size of this market in 2021, our consultants warned us that depending on the entrepreneurial interest and the kind of breakdown between indoor and outdoor, we would have to consider strategies for limiting production in year 2 or 3 of the market. So again, no decision has been made yet on this. We will flesh out the arguments for and against after public comment and before we vote. As with retail, my hope would be that the pause is temporary and just long enough for us to update our supply and demand analysis, think through some production management tools that the legislature authorized or that we need to seek authorization for, and then develop strategies to ensure the craft nature of this market is preserved. So with that, before we turn to public comment, we need to approve minutes from our last regular meeting on August 28th, 2024. Also our evidentiary hearing on September 11th, 2024, and our 2 social equity working group meetings that were August 21st and September 24th.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So next on the agenda is public comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts about a licensing pause, but honestly, whatever you'd like to comment on is, certainly on the table. So we'll just handle this the same way we normally do. If you join via the link, please raise your virtual hand. And then once we get through those, we'll move to people that join via the phone. And maybe Patrick, if you could just help us with the order here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, first one up is Wayne. Go ahead, Wayne.
Thank you. The CCB's last communication clearly stated that there would be a process released for ongoing dispensary applications. We've put down hard money, mortgaged our property, and gotten into a situation where we are leveraged to make a dispensary happen. The timeline on getting through this process is very long, and to pull it out from under us will literally wreck us personally and financially, and our community that's put in to make this happen. We're marginalized. My life was ruined once by legal and financial cannabis laws, and now facing a second financial ruin because of the closing of licensing out of the blue when we were months in is onerous and discriminatory. This will have horrible impacts on us. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
Jesse, you're next up. Go ahead, Jesse.
Hey, Jesse with Graham Central and Big House Cultivation. Just commenting on like the period of time that's sort of given to sort out finishing your application or gaining licensure on a 30-day window is incredibly tight, particularly due to the nature of the way of how you have to have occupancy in place. You have to have all the infrastructure built, security. There's an incredible amount of investment to stand up cultivation or retail, and if you just kind of pull that out and say, you've got to have this all sorted out within 30 days, but also in reality, if you want to get on the next meeting, you have to have it sorted out in, less than 15 days, like it's just like we had built out to be tier 2 mixed for big house cultivation, which was going to be on this agenda meeting, but it's not. And then to find out, oh, if you're not done in 30 days, you can't have it. Like that feels like pulling the rug out from folks that have invested a lot of money. So I just have that, I sort of echo that same concern around shortened timelines and not giving, people investing all this money and then, oops, tough luck. It's kind of what it feels like. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jesse.
Oh, also, am I still on?
Yep.
If I can add that, like, if there's a perception of an oversupply of flower or product, right? How are we going to resolve that by shutting down licensure? Like there needs to be more shelf space for these folks, and there are plenty of places. So I think there are a lot of places that are underserved, and James, you alluded to a lot of those issues with things being too condensed and stuff like that. So I think we need to keep licensing open, frankly, for retailers. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jesse.
Next up, we have James. Go ahead, James. James, you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead. All right, we're going to jump down to Andrew Lugo. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hello, my name's Andrew. I'm an employee with Vermont Terps, sales employee. And this is just kind of talking about, especially after what was talked about in the beginning of the meeting. I've recently visited over a dozen Vermont dispensaries over the past month, and there seems to be a mass confusion to exactly what our product is and if it's legal. To clarify, our product that we offer is evaluated, registered, and regulated by the CCB, by you guys. We are a Vermont company. All of our hemp was grown by us in Vermont. All of our THC and CBD distillates were made by us right here in Proctor, Vermont. And we provide QR codes that link directly to the COA on each of our products. We provide full compliant packaging. We make distillates, sativa, and indica right here in-house, and we meet the state maximal levels in each of our products. So I'm just kind of like clarifying that we appreciate you commenting on that in the beginning of the meeting.
Great. All right. Thanks for the comment and clarification.
I'm going to try again for James. James, if you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead. All right, Bernardo, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for your time today. This is expected, I think, what we're coming to, but I think the board is going to try to do the best for the industry. I just want a consideration to be made, given the state's mandate, that we want to keep bringing people in from the illicit market to not at least remove tier 1 licensing for cultivators and not prevent them from entering market, and even further, continuing allowances for social equity and economic empowerment applicants continuously, and not shut them out from the potential of entering the industry as hard as it is. I'm out and about right now, so I just appreciate the time. And the last thing I want to say is transfers of licenses. Please give consideration to what this will have to people selling their businesses to other people that want to get in, and just make sure that, it doesn't turn into this crazy fire sale of businesses because no one can get in. Thank you, board. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernardo.
Next hand up, we have TCCVT. Go ahead.
Hello, my name's Chris Morak, Cannabis Collective. I just wanted to touch on what Wayne, the first commenter, said. we had recently this summer bought a building and have been going through renovations and have an application in for retail, and to all of a sudden find out that we could not have that opportunity without really any warning would be pretty detrimental to us as a business. We just wanted to know or have some clarification about if you do decide to vote about closing that retail applications, like, is there a timeline? If we already have an application in, it's being worked on. Also, like, how that's going to look for a temporary close if you do decide to do that. I think that it would be, without any warning at all, hurt companies that possibly have been putting money into this. Also, as far as cultivation goes, it's hard for us to really grasp how much the state needs. There's a lot of people saying, we don't have a way to sell our product and we're having issues because of saturation, and we don't really have stores in all the places that we need to have stores because, some towns aren't voting to allow it. So it's kind of hard when, okay, places like Stowe won't allow it, but then you have a couple stores in Waterbury and a couple stores in Morrisville. But that's filling in the gap that Stowe doesn't allow it. So I don't know. I think it's hard to put a value on that and where you're going to go with it. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And we will, that's going to be part of the conversation for today.
Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that you guys are in a tough spot. Like, I think license holders recognize that with the legislative, sort of misstep of opt-in. So I don't envy the position, but I think that I'd like to reiterate that if supply, if eliminating demand and eliminating shelf space, wherever that is problematic for supply. It sort of feels like we're working against the market, on two ends. So just food for thought, and just reiterating that more time, if you're going to shut something down, current people that are in process, 30 days is not enough. I would, recommend 90 days or, extending that or review or something like that to see where people are at so that their investments aren't just, go by the wayside. Thank you.
Sorry, we had two Jessies. The other Jesse OGVT, why don't you go ahead? I think you're up next.
Sorry.
What the heck, Jesse from Graham Central. No, all good. I was just throwing out there, which this hasn't even been brought up, but I just want to get it out there. Is I'm glad that if you guys are going to put a pause, to make sure you put a pause on both, because I have heard conversation just over the past year, as all of us have tried to get a handle on this, of people saying, oh, maybe we should pause the retail but not pause cultivation. And I personally just think that would be a nightmare. And if you need a pause both like you had intended. Also, I just want to say that I recognize that you guys do not want to be in this position, that the legislation put you guys in this position. And I think what you're trying to do is to just prevent an influx of all of a sudden people coming in. So I get that, and would just push to hopefully maybe in the future the opportunity presents itself to really go for the opt-out instead of opt-in. I think that would be really helpful if we can move in that direction. That's all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
Michelle Chapman, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for allowing us to talk today. I just wanted to comment that I hope you guys can leave Tier 1 cultivation open, and if that is not possible, that people that had licenses before that maybe did not renew. In our situation, my husband's health is now an issue, and we did not renew our Tier 1 cultivation this year, but have hopes that my husband will be nice and healthy next year and we can grow again. However, this would be a huge crash on that dream. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Next up, I think I'm going to assume it's the same James that had some difficulties earlier. James, why don't you go ahead with your comment?
Yes, sir. Am I good now?
Yeah.
We hear
Perfect.
you. Yep.
We switched platforms. Perfect. I just wanted to comment. I did send a note late last night. I was fortunate enough to hear that there may be a vote today. It was a little shocking. I actually have signed a purchase and sales agreement and am under contract to buy a building to open a new dispensary in Springfield. And so I just wanted to echo some of the other concerns that, this was sort of sprung upon and unexpected. And it would really be unfortunate if there wasn't at least some sort of allowance made for those who are currently trying to work through the licensing process to go ahead and finish. There's a lot on the line. A lot of people are really excited, and a lot of hiring has already been done. And that's just besides for my own, personal investment being on the hook already. So it would be nice to, if you do, I would hope that you delay, at least a few months. But if not, at least if there could be at least some sort of allowance for those of us who have already happened into the process and are already wading in to the waters, so to speak, and trying to get involved with this wonderful community. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you for your time, and I'd hope you'd at least consider those of us that are in that gray area currently.
Great. Thanks, James.
Thanks. Why don't we go to Jim next? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Kind of want to mimic James a little bit. I'm in a similar situation in an area of Vermont that was really, really restricted. The town had put forth vigorous restrictions that made it virtually impossible for someone that wasn't already a property owner to come in and open up a dispensary. And now getting this news is just very disheartening because we've poured our heart and soul into it. We finally have a location. We finally have a great concept. We want to get the community excited and become entrepreneurs for this great adventure. And if you vote no, then all those dreams are shattered. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, next up, Tito Byrne. Go ahead, Tito.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense. Big move. I really feel the pain of all those people that are still in the process, especially when you're not deeply financed. That process can break even the most talented of entrepreneurs. But I do definitely commend the board on trying to fix some of these problems. So it feels like maybe a targeted approach is what's needed. But I'm definitely feeling like what Michelle was saying as well with the tier ones and the smaller players. It does feel like those doors should just always be open. And then just one quick note about the future medical program changes. I do just want to reiterate, it feels incredibly important that when a medical patient comes into a recreational Vermont dispensary, a Vermont medical patient, I should say specifically, that there's not extended, long, arduous process or the need for multiple rooms. It should just be one button, Vermont medical patient, one button, touch it, and all the cannabis taxes go away. Thank you. Hope you're all having a great day.
Thanks, Tito.
Next up, Mark Fryer. Go ahead, Mark.
But just to give you an example of someone else who I think is in a similar situation, 3-year lease to space I've been paying on for about 5 or 6 months, went through pre-qualification, and as far as I knew, I had a year to apply, and now I've been spending probably at this point about $25,000 on branding and space design, and was planning on construction starting in October. Concerned obviously of my ability to get a license once we're done building. So not sure if a pre-approved license would continue to be able to be applied, or if I might be shut out. So definitely concerned, and not sure if I should be spending any money next month, but I'm 5 days away from breaking ground. So just concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead, Lois Baldwin.
Yes, I just want to reiterate what the other people have said in terms of the retail. I have also applied. I'm getting ready to sign my lease. Spent significant amounts of money and time, and I think it would be a shame to just shut everything down at this point without some kind of notice or some kind of process to have the people who are already in the application process be able to finish that. And I would encourage the board not to shut things down immediately without some kind of process. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Lois.
Next up, Mark Bardwell. Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to apologize. I was at work and I missed the first 6 minutes of the meeting, but I've been listening for the last 14 minutes. It's I I don't want to assume, but it sounds like we're taking a vote today for potentially suspending licenses approvals.
It's on the agenda. Yes.
Oh, okay. So I guess we completed our application. We have everything done, and we made the agenda finally for this month. And now potentially I won't be getting a license. Is that correct?
No, that's not
Oh,
correct.
okay. I guess I misheard the beginning of the. I didn't catch the beginning of the meeting. My apologies.
I would just say, just so we don't have to kind of keep retreading the same ground, there's at least a 30-day notice period. If we voted today, there's at least 30 days, and that can be extended by the board. So, when people keep saying there needs to be a process, like the process is spelled out in our rules. So just want to just reiterate that those rules that specific rule has not changed in the kind of last 2 years or however long.
Okay, let's go to Matthew Schrag.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking my comment. I'm glad to hear you guys are not interested in this decision, but are kind of forced into it. One of the things I'd like to ask of you all to present when you guys start deliberation around this is the rationale for closing off retail licensure. You understand the Cannabis Control Board needs to preserve the health of the cannabis program itself. And there are certainly arguments for cultivation, limiting that, and how and when the supply chain is managed for the overall health of the cannabis program. But I'd like to hear the rationale for how the Cannabis Control Board sees limiting retail access as helping the health of the cannabis program itself. And I worry a little bit about the overreach of trying to protect just small businesses. That seems to be a potential overstep of what the Cannabis Control Board should be doing. There has to be an element of competition for businesses to be able to do that. And protecting the health of the program itself, yes, totally makes sense. So I would just like to hear some comments from you all, if possible, when you get to that point of how limiting retail access does that to helps the overall cannabis program. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Matt.
Next, we'll go to Noah Fishman. Go ahead, Noah.
Thanks. So I just want to say that I think that Vermont has potential to really be one of the most special places to come and experience and purchase and see a new type of cannabis industry, or see a very locally focused, high quality craft cannabis industry. Both in terms of the product and the experience you have going into individual stores is unique already. And I do worry about the stifling of creativity on the retail side and innovation. And I also worry about that for the small scale grower because there is, yes, there's, you could argue there's oversupply. I'm not going to weigh in on that, but I'm sure that there's a lot of opportunity to innovate on the product side. And I think that the tier one grower does, can do things that are that are irrespective of any oversupply. An incredible flower in this market sells. And the tier one is a special type of grower. And I view this similar way about the individual retailer. Given that we have the one license rule, I think that it's important for people to live out their dreams and develop concepts that may be innovative in Vermont, regardless of, where they may be.
Thanks, Noah.
And next we'll go to Dave Silverman. Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm not going to weigh in on the closing, not closing. I will say, just as a PSA here, you don't need to wait until you are done with your upfit to get a certificate of occupancy from fire safety. You just have to close your construction permit, and not everything you are going to do in your upfit is necessarily construction in the eyes of fire safety. So to the extent that you are already in your construction phase, think about ways of getting your CO faster. It is possible. I do want to weigh in on some other things, though, one of which is why people are still rushing into this market, even though it appears to many to be overserved and oversaturated. And I think a big problem here is that you, the CCB, have yet to release any data. We've been asking for data. We've been promised the data is coming. I think it was a year ago in public comment that I said, hey, what's going on with data? We've been about a year into the market and was told that data is coming any day. We're 2 years in. In fact, 4 days from now, Flora will have reached the second anniversary of our first ever sale on September 29th. And there's no data. I can go onto the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission's website, and I can see weekly data broken down in all sorts of beautiful ways. I don't know what's being sold in Vermont. I don't know the size of the market in Vermont. I don't know what consumers are buying outside my own store. I don't know whether my store is normal in its distribution across product categories. I don't know what the average wholesale price is. It's impossible to make rational decisions without data. And I beg you to focus your efforts on getting reliable data out to the market publicly as soon as possible, because that will help people decide where to go, where to invest in this industry. And it will stop people from over-investing in places where they're not going to get their money back. 2, your recent guidance on product labeling and product registration. I want to express some profound disappointment. In my last public comment at the last meeting, I asked the board to come up with a pathway for figuring out how to let us sell products like pre-rolls containing both THC and CBD from hemp. THC from cannabis and CBD from hemp. The response in this guidance was no, just a flat out no. And the reasoning I really find not compelling. The reasoning in the guidance is that consumers will be misled. And I don't know, I talk to consumers a lot, probably more than you guys do. And I just don't see that. I think proper labeling and disclosure is possible. I think consumer safety is absolutely possible through the appropriate testing. And I think there's got to be a way, and that you guys should do better. Similarly, your guidance on caffeine, I think it's not rational. To limit caffeine, to say that caffeine is an adulterant, except when it's intrinsic to the food base, does not make sense. The danger of caffeine is in its quantity, not its source material. Caffeine that is properly disclosed in the label, and it can come with additional warnings if you feel that is necessary. It's there. whether it's added or intrinsic to the food base, it's the same caffeine with the same effect on health. And to make the distinction be whether it was brewed from coffee or espresso powder in a chocolate ganache versus whether it was added in, it doesn't provide any, there's no consumer safety difference between those things. And so if you focused on consumer safety, I think you would realize that really what you should be doing is limiting the amount of caffeine, not the source. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
And next we'll go to Jeffrey. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Patrick. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks, Chair. For the record, Jeffrey Pizzatello of Vermont Growers Association. Though we've got growers in our name, we are proud that our members represent the entire supply chain of the regulated market. And I would not be surprised if we are one of the largest, if not the largest, member-based cannabis nonprofit in the state. So broad representation there, which I think is germane to this conversation. Before I get into my primary comments, I just want to pause and actually, maybe once in a blue moon here, but on record, support what the previous commenter had said with regards to product registration. We stand behind those comments, notably around caffeine. The purpose of my comments now are I ask board that you reconsider including the agenda item for this meeting to vote and possibly close the application process for initial cultivation and retailers. And if you do include that in the agenda, I ask that the commissioners, each of you, that you vote no on that item. And please allow me just a couple words to explain my position and for you to consider at that point in time if it does come up on the agenda. We look at some states that were raised in earlier comments with regards to this item, Oregon and others that have provided moratoriums. Moratoriums, as we also see if we look at those states, and as we all know, creates a lose-lose situation for the market, for the economy. Some of the issues that Oregon and other states that consider moratoriums that I hear also raised in this state are issues of market saturation, what we would characterize as bottlenecks, which includes price collapse, volatility around seasonality, ebbs and flows, and healthy geographical distribution. A moratorium or even a momentary pause does not provide solutions or address any of those issues. In fact, when we look at the states that impose moratoriums, they compound those issues. The Enabling Statute, Act 164/2020, if we all recall, it charged this agency with two primary items, which is addressing the legacy market and doing so in an equity lens. This decision runs contrary to both of those charges. When it comes to influence from and political influence and legislative influence from the State House and the executive, we all know that the governor is not supportive of a regulated cannabis market. He did not sign the Enabling Statute. When it comes to making decisions based upon those influences, I would ask that we don't consider them. We will not arrive at a viable market if we're using those in our decision-making process as an agency. I'm not saying that's happening, but I just want to put that on the record. When it comes to the issue of product saturation, price collapse, seasonality, geographical distribution, again, I urge you to not vote and not even consider this as an item for today. And if you do, and if it happens to come across as passing the board today, that I ask you to please commit to including in the conversation actual solutions to address these issues. Those solutions would involve creative solutions around addressing retail opt-in and accurately getting at geographical distribution, and also some form of direct sales. These have to be part of the conversation if we are going to move forward in this angle. I just want to conclude by saying this marks what I would characterize as a watershed moment for our marketplace. Do we want to have a unique marketplace that's reflective of Vermont as a culture that's successful, equitable, and viable? Or do we want to go down a tried and true path of a diminished market that we see in Oregon and elsewhere? These are moments, agency, where we can prevent this from happening. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I don't see any other hands up. So anyone who joined via phone and would like to make a public comment, you can unmute yourself by hitting *6, and we'll try our best to kind of do this orderly if multiple people go at once. Jesse, I see your hand up. I'm just waiting for the phone, folks. All right, Jesse, do you want to comment?
Yeah. I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with what Jeffrey said. And do encourage each board member to vote no or not even bring this to the table. I think it's a mistake. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Elizabeth, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
No, shoot. Okay. No one can. Hold on. Now we can. Okay. So I appreciate the bind that you guys are in, but I would say that in my experience of dealing with licensure with the board, and I know that this is not your fault because I know that you're pretty underfunded, but it takes a really long time just to even get responses from you all. And so if you were going to, impose some sort of time frame, I think you would simultaneously have to commit to being incredibly responsive to the people who are still in the licensure process. Because we just went through the process of acquiring a license, and we had all of our work done within a month, and then we waited another 2 or 3.5 before you guys were able to do your part. And so that's just that would just compound the unfairness of what people are already expressing if you didn't make that commitment to making it really, really expeditious on your side. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, last call for public comment. Okay, I'll close the public comment window. All right, Bobby, last word.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to primarily echo all of Jeffrey's statements and just impress upon y'all to consider how creating a market for commoditized licenses will really only empower folks with, substantially outsized resources. If you do choose to go down this path, I hope you'll take deep consideration in how license transferring will play out in the future so that this isn't like a backdoor approach for market capture. With that said, density is absolutely an issue in a couple of areas, but in a market where overproduction is often a focal point of discussion, whether that be the case or not, I think it is imperative to provide a broad spectrum of outlets, and that is coming directly from a producer's standpoint. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, I will close the public comment window. Josh, why don't you go ahead?
I just wanted to echo and support everything Jeffrey said, and also just underscore again that, just because we're in this industry right now doesn't mean we are entitled to the market. This is a consumer spending driven market, and people need to be willing to buy what you're making and what you're selling. And it really sucks, I understand, but there's a lot of people who got into this market with a greedy mentality, with not a lot of respect for the plant, and moved quickly and made poor decisions. And for the state to intervene and in effect pick winners and losers is very much not okay. It's against the interests of consumers, of the market as a whole, and direct to consumer, creating more opportunity for retail to be in more towns and more markets, I think is the most important thing. And none of us, are really entitled to this. And we really, I think, it could be a huge mistake, and it could have compounding impacts on the market that really just serve to benefit mostly investors and not actually people working in it, and definitely not consumers. So
Thanks, Josh. All right, I'm going to close the public comment window, and just a few initial reactions, and then we'll move kind of through the agenda. The initial legislation, Act 164, fully anticipated they gave 30 days for each license type, and then that window closed. They fully expected the board to open and close these, ratchet up and ratchet down these licenses in response to what we're seeing in the market. So, to think that this is a dramatic shift, I think we all feel that dramatic shift only because we've left it open for so long, but it was certainly in the contemplation of the legislature, right or wrong, that we would be making these kind of dynamic changes. And we don't have the authority to just shut down retail and saturated areas. We are just given that authority, but we can only do that through rulemaking. And so, the idea that we can kind of take a scalpel and say, all right, well, no more in Burlington until one kind of goes out of business, or no more in Rutland until one goes out of business. We don't have that authority. And then, I always have to come back to the legislature almost passed the licensing moratorium, a 2-year moratorium with immediate effect earlier this year. We kind of told them that this market is too dynamic to just say no new licenses ever. And if we and by the way, every state that's implemented a moratorium through the legislature has never lifted it. So really, if we want to continue to have some control over this, we have to do it ourselves. And it's an unfortunate position to be in, but it is temporary. It's going, the idea is that it's temporary. But with that, I think I'll move to the agenda. I've teed up some of the rationale, at least my rationale for this conversation in my opening remarks. We know that these have dramatic consequences, and it's not just about whether we close this license type or that license type. It's about how we do it. What are the kind of dynamics of the vote? So I think for the sake of getting through this in an orderly matter, I think we should start with retail. So just the basic rationale that I talked about from my perspective is that there's an unnatural distribution of retail stores emerging. The legislature agreed with that kind of conclusion. They asked the CCB, after discussing a moratorium, to intervene, and they gave us the authority to create citing requirements that increase the geographic distribution of new cannabis retail establishments. Rulemaking is a long and public process. I'm concerned that once we start having realistic conversations about how we're going to move forward and create this more geographic, equilibrium, that we're going to see a rush towards these already saturated markets for the reasons I said, that I think most people would rather roll the dice in Burlington and then trying to kind of a populated area than trying to just, be relegated to a place that, maybe doesn't have quite as many customers or consumers. And that will further exacerbate a problem that the legislature asked us to intervene on. So I just that's the rationale that I see for the retail pause. Again, temporary pause while we write our rules. Yeah, please.
I'd like to add one thing to that, because I think a lot of the conversations that I have had or been leading with cultivators, and I think, my other members here have done the same, is trying to get more cultivators interested in the retail license. We hear so much about direct to consumer. I think direct to consumer is a tough push this year, or even next year, or even the year after that, from a legislative perspective. But I asked in the cultivator roundtable, as we look at retail right now, we see it as this place with TVs and couches and hanging out and so on and so forth. And that's not what every retail establishment looks like around the state. But if we strip away all of that aesthetic and we get to the core of what a retail establishment needs to have from a security perspective, from everything else that we require in our rules, how can we bring more retail oriented thought processes to what might help small cultivators and those that don't feel like they can make the leap into a full retail establishment? I think one of the things that this pause could actually help from that perspective is, as all of you, I'm hoping will comment on a lot of our retail licensing, retail security, X, Y, and Z requirements that we have in place now. If we can find ways to make that license type more palatable for folks that want to sell their own product, maybe on the property where they're growing, obviously there's some other considerations that need to happen there, but why put those folks through the retail ringer now when we're looking at making certain retail requirements a little bit more palatable for small cultivators in our rule rewrite, which, for those in the know or not in the know, like I think you just alluded to, rulemaking can take 4 to 6 months. So if you're looking to get licensed now and you're going to pay the fee and you're going to do all these things, and then we're going to make it easier for more folks to kind of do their own retail gig, understanding that direct to consumer is far away. And that's not our decision. That's not what we've said to the legislature. It's just reality. I think under that new set of retail regulations, it might be more palatable for a lot more small businesses to enter this market if we think about retail licensing a little different. And I will caveat by saying, like, no matter if we do this today or we do this in a year or 3 months from now, it's really heavy for the three of us, I would imagine, to hear some of the stories that we're hearing today. They are always going to be there. This is one of those things where there's never going to be a good time to do this because there's always money and investment on the line. And I point back to what you just said. It's not what we do, it's how we do it. And if we just anticipate this being part of the rule rewrite, we can't put a specific timeline on how that's going to take, but I don't want folks to think that because we're closing this today, we're never going to reopen this license type. I don't think that that's entered my mind. That is not where I'm at with this. It's an opportunity to pause and look at what we have to do from a legislative perspective, and also how we can make certain things easier for some folks that don't have that investment background or that investment portfolio to enter this market and dictate where their product is going. Again, I know direct-to-consumer sales is something that should be part of this market. We've all acknowledged that on the record at the legislature. I think we're trying to find ways to kind of arrive at a similar destination on a very different trajectory than that direct-to-consumer would, otherwise be from a legislative perspective.
The thing I've thought about most in the last several months is exactly what you said, although I thought that was going to be the quiet part out loud, which is that we narrowly escaped a moratorium that was in statute, and we would have far less control over the market in that regard, and it would become a far more political decision. And so I think in order to maintain the sort of like what you were talking about, to ratchet up, to ratchet down the market and control the health of the market, we do need to my rationale is that we need to close the retail at the very least, at least until we're done or are well on our way to writing those rules around retail siting, so that when people do come back, when we do open it up, they're operating under those new rules. Oversaturating any stage in the supply chain can equal market collapse. So that could happen at the cultivator, that could happen at the retailer, could happen at the manufacturer level. So we have a lot of retailers all over the state of Vermont, and they're saturated in certain areas. That's pretty clear to me. And even that oversaturation could create some level of collapse. And then it makes it more difficult to get product to market because we have even fewer retailers. So that's the kind of rationale that I've been thinking about over the last few weeks, especially, and then definitely since the legislative session.
One thing that I've used on and thought about is exactly some of the points that we heard in public comment. There's enough small cultivators out there that are desperate for shelf space. How does closing down retail help that problem at all? And, I'm thinking about it in a different way, because every month we hear small cultivators cannot find shelf space. And every month we license new retailers, and that problem doesn't get solved, even if we're licensing new retailers, because every retailer is thinking ahead. They have connections, they have folks they want to put on their store shelves. They know whether, to Dave's point, we don't have the data that you're seeking right now, and that's another conversation that we should have in public. But there are statewide brands that people know, and prospective retailers want those brands in their store because consumers know about them. I think it's almost a facade in a way that new retailers guarantee more shelf space for folks that otherwise can't find it. And in my conversations, it's led me to the conclusion that that is a facade in some ways. We could work through our rules to require certain percentages of shelf space dedicated to small cultivators. We did that with integrateds at a point. There was friction there because small cultivators didn't want to be on those store shelves, and vice versa. And that's beyond our control. But I'm struggling to kind of see and square more shelf space means more opportunities for small cultivators for a number of reasons. And so again, it's an indefinite pause, but it's a pause. And that doesn't help the prospective retailers that are looking and sinking money in and paying leases and so on and so forth, and taxes on property that they otherwise can't use. But I'm in a school of two camps here, or you know what I mean. We could say 30 days is our requirement. We could push that to 60 days, as some folks are asking us. But then our rationale for doing this subsides, because if we're going to do it because we want to focus on our rules, then we've got to push rulemaking an additional 30 days. It doesn't make sense to open up rulemaking in October, because then people have an extended period of time to kind of look at the saturation and rush into those situations as you're referring to. So, I think if we're going to vote on closing retail, which, I see the rationale in, like, if we push it further than 30 days, then we've got to push rulemaking too. Because that's the rationale, and those two should be tied together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on a thread that you had around direct to consumer. We all recognize the need for that. That's how people can tell their stories directly. That's how they can kind of, highlight their products and create their own markets. I don't think adding a new retail location and creating more shelf space in Burlington is going to increase demand there, but I do feel like having this direct to consumer gives, smaller operators a shot. I do think that, our siting rules, whatever they are going to have some form of kind of identification of saturated areas based upon population and number of stores. And, on the smaller towns, the Newberries that only have a general store and a post office, like, they can't really support a full blown kind of standalone retail cannabis. I think we're really going to have to kind of think about dusting off some of our store within a store kind of rules that we considered, or recommendations that we considered, or kind of maybe some kind of direct to consumer model. And, we're not going to necessarily be able to change the fee for it, but until the legislature is back in town. But we could kind of work out ways where, you can kind of sell within an existing store, as long as you meet certain security and ID check arrangements.
Yeah, I just want to impress upon people that we're not looking for this to be permanent. I think we need to take a step back and look at our market and look at how we can improve it from the inside out. It's not intended to be permanent, and I think we can provide more opportunities for less heavily invested folks by taking a more serious look at our retail regulations. It makes me anxious to do that, knowing that that we have so many prospective retailers that will do it, and some maybe wouldn't do it with the spirit of what this market is about, as we heard from some commenters.
I do think that a pause gives us a chance to shift our resources to focusing on data, to cleaning up cleaning up certain processes, getting things a little bit smoother, letting the staff sort of get a handle on things. And I think that that is an opportunity for the board to look at the market, like you're saying, do a deep dive. We haven't done that since our very beginning, and that was based on assumptions. Now we have real information to work with. So I see it as a benefit for the full market, but then also we've said it several times, like a pause. Like I don't think any of us expect that we would never open licensing again. That's just not realistic.
So on the kind of the timelines that we've heard a lot about, I just want to say that the rules state that we have to give a minimum of 30 days notice, but let's kind of take a look at what the pipeline looks like. Right now we have 9 retailers that have submitted applications and are somewhere in the licensing pipeline. And we have 12 more that have been or are actively working through pre-qualification, but have not submitted any sort of application materials. So we don't have any visibility really other than what we heard today about how far along each of those businesses are. But I would say that we're going to see a slide in the executive director report later today that shows that it usually takes us on average about 75 days from the date of initial submission of an application to us approving it at a board meeting. So if we do a 30-day pause, there's a shot for the people that have already submitted applications, but there's probably no opportunity for any new applications to come in, during this pause or for them to be approved. So I do really think that this is going to be a temporary pause, just so everyone's clear on that. Like if the legislature did this, we have no control. We do have control over this. And really, if we had the authority to kind of just pause retail in certain areas of the state, I'd probably prefer that path. I don't think we have that authority. But I think we can immediately kind of start putting pen to paper on these retail siting rules. But we may, I think, want to consider 2 deadlines here for retail. One is that mandatory 30-day application window. And then one is a longer runway for people that have applications active in the pipeline that are, at or near completion. That may be waiting on things like their certificate of occupancy, or they may be waiting for a contract or something. So, we have to give the 30 days, but again, I want to just stress on that 30 days is that any new application, if we do vote to close it in 30 days, any new application we receive as of today is not going to be licensed, because we've just never been able to do that in 30 days.
I have a clarifying question about what you're saying. So you're talking about people, not just people who've submitted pre-qual, but people who've actually started their application and are significantly, like they're waiting on somebody else, a third party to finish background check, close a permit, something like that. Is that what you're?
I'm saying that we at least give the people that are actively in the application that have submitted a longer runway than just the 30 days.
Okay.
To get to complete, and we should be crystal clear about what we mean by complete, and we should be crystal clear about how many days beyond the 30 that we're going to give people. I think that'll just give our licensing team set clear expectations and give our licensing team clear expectations. So it would be my preference that we close the application portal for new retail applications after 30 days, which is laid out in our rule, because anyone who's coming in now is not going to get licensed anyway. But then we consider we can continue to work with businesses that have an application in the pipeline through, I just thought November 15th, which is the Friday before our November board meeting, so that we could approve them in November. So that would be, if we vote today, that would be 51 days or 50 days, depending on if you count today. So it would be giving the people in the pipeline 50 days to try and complete. those kind of nine applicants.
So my question then is, does that fit with the processes that the staff have set up, or is it going to create additional processes that will take more time?
I don't think we'll need any additional processes.
Okay.
I think what we'll do after this meeting, we'll reach out to every person who is in the queue with a full application, as well as to anybody who is in pre-qualification process or has completed, to provide them specific guidance on what was discussed in this meeting and what they should be working on, and including the timelines and deadlines. I think that's a lift that the licensing team will do. And then again, depending on, the board chair made it very clear that it takes a long time for folks to get through our licensing process. So I would trust that our community will respect the chair, and we are not going to see a huge number of submissions tomorrow morning, which again, something we can't control, but hopefully that's not the case. And then giving our licensing team until November 15th to work with the folks in the pipeline seems reasonable. We'll know who those folks are. So I don't see us having any surprises there. It's just as long as the folks are aware what our timelines are and are willing to work with the licensing team and have their ducks in a row, so to speak, we should be able to make good progress.
And again, to the comments about transfers or creating secondary value of these licenses on, buying and selling them, not through us, but through kind of contractual agreements. I think we're anticipating this opening up sometime in the spring, if we're thinking about our rulemaking process. Maybe by then there might be an appetite at the legislature for opt-in to change, or more opt-in towns on town meeting day. The whole landscape could look a little bit differently in the spring, as a loose timeline on when we would anticipate reopening, the retail license type if we were to do this today. I think as far as the timeline, that makes sense to me. I just come back to make sure we're all comfortable with that and the rationale with which we're doing this, which is, if folks are, and I imagine folks will be so far along in the application process, you can't really game the system at that point if we're thinking about retail saturation, depending on when we do file proposed rules. But it's just something that I want us to be cognizant of moving forward.
So I want to talk about the transfer of licenses, as well as the changes of location, because I think that there's some real practical considerations about both of those. I am pretty confident that the legislature did not want there to be a secondary market for these licenses. The face value is $10,000, but if they are a kind of a limited number of them, then they can grow in value, of course, which prices people out, is not equitable, et cetera. Of course, the flip side of that is if there's a financially stressed retailer during this pause that needs to sell, that business is essentially worthless if the new owners or the prospective buyers can't get a license. So personally, I'm inclined to keep the retail pause short, as we've said many times, and maybe we'll not have to be in this situation of transfers, but allow them if needed. And then third, get clarification in statute from the legislature when they're back in session, whether they intended for these licenses to revert back to the state during a transfer or kind of run with the business.
Yeah, and I'd be a little bit more concerned. I share your sentiment. I'd be a little bit more concerned if this pause was something like a year or beyond, but I don't know if there's as much value, unless it's the distressed business that needs to sell. Like, I just don't see a secondary market popping up when this pause is only going to be for 6 months. You're going to pay X amount more dollars for maybe a month or two head start by the time you get your license. It just doesn't feel like that's a real concern for me at this point, but I could be thinking about it in the wrong way.
I think the market's too young for that. I mean, if we saw more relinquishments, we might see a secondary value in the licenses, but I think we're too early for that. And in terms of the allowing the transfers, do we have any knowledge of any number of retail licenses now that are in the midst of doing a transfer that would this would impact.
I'm aware of under
Okay.
117.
Okay.
On the change of location, I think the practical considerations are a little bit different. You know, on the one hand, if we could kind of just by emergency rule lay out what a saturated market is and allow kind of retailers in saturated markets to change locations to non-saturated areas, you know, I would be okay with that. However, I think we don't really have that ability. You know, a scenario that I would like to avoid if possible is if one of the more populous towns that is currently opted out opts in during this pause, like a South Burlington or a Williston, you know, we might see a mad dash amongst the existing retailers to try and change location to one of those towns. You know, we would be probably the only people that know what's happening because the change of application, the change of location would come to us. And we'd probably legally have to let it happen, you know, let that happen. And it could be, you know, 20 retailers that are scattered throughout the state, all seeing Williston just opened up and they all rush at the same time to Williston, not knowing that anyone else is rushing there. And then we create a new saturated area, potentially a worse saturated area. So I actually don't think that we should, probably allow changes of location during the pause. So I think change of ownership, yes. Change of location, probably not, in my view. But I'm open to thoughts on that.
My only concern would be contingency. If somebody's, you know, landlord sells or, you know, like that kind of something beyond the licensee's control, fire, flood, whatever it is that they're moving because of a contingency like that. And I think you're right. I mean, we'll know, you know, in February, who's going to have it on their ballot for March. So, or we'll know at the end of January, right? I think that's when they vote on the language.
You know better than I do. I mean,
I would like to think, I don't remember. In the winter, they start voting on what's going to be on the ballot or putting what's on the ballot. So,
what I was going to just very briefly say for the folks listening, if we thought any states are going to be on opt-in in November, it's already on the ballot, most likely. I mean, it's September 25th.
Any municipalities.
Municipalities on the ballot for opt-in.
Yeah, we would know that.
It has to be done through Australian ballot. They're not going to do one of these as a standalone measure. It's going to be on a combined on a down ballot, you know.
There's no clearinghouse. The only challenge is that there's no clearinghouse for ballot items like that. Like we can't just go to the Secretary of State's and say, who's got this on their ballot? They don't track that.
But the big areas that we're waiting to opt in,
yeah,
as you've mentioned, I'd imagine that would be more widely known at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we allow like kind of acts of God, unforeseen circumstances, and permit changes of location versus and limiting it in other circumstances?
I think so. I mean, I think, you know, big picture, I'd want to emphasize that my understanding of current law is that the license itself is not an alienable asset that can be bought by Corporation B from Corporation A. Instead, it's conferred by the board on the corporation that's the license holder. And so the corporation itself could be sold, of course, when the license would be intact, but it would be intact only subject to a new application under your rule 1.17. So whether it's a change in ownership or a change in location, you'd start with the existing corporation that's an incumbent licensee, and then the change would have to be approved by this board. And I think that that's where your discretion comes in. We don't have very clear standards about what approval or disapproval means. We know it has to do with background checks of the people involved, but I think you also could disapprove a license application because the act would be contrary to public policy. It would be contrary to the very recent act of the General Assembly telling you to get it together with site stuff and come up with site rules. And so if the primary effect of a transfer application would be, or an application to move, would be to frustrate the policy of the board and the policy of the General Assembly, I think that would probably be a legitimate basis to deny it that could be defended in court. Whereas if you had what Board Member Gilbert is talking about, you could say this wasn't a ploy to contravene the policy. This just happened and the people involved couldn't control it. So I do think you have discretion in extraordinary cases to make that distinction.
Should we talk cultivation?
Sure.
Sure.
So again, the rationale is we're heading into one of these post-harvest oversupply shocks. So there's no immediate concern about unmet demand or not being able to meet demand in the short term. All of our pre-launch projections, as you mentioned, around supply and demand need to be updated using the actual sales data. We want to preserve the small scale craft nature of this market. And we need to consider strategies for better production management, greater market access for smaller operators, and policies that allow for more of the products and services that the illicit market offers in the regulated market. On that, I just think about lifting the potency caps, changes to kind of allowing public consumption, on-site consumption, federal legalization. I think, we need to really kind of think through this, just take a breath, think through this market, and kind of evaluate it and see how kind of what this kind of supply and demand looks like and how under certain scenarios that might change, how much more cultivation this can bear. Certainly, we've always kind of thought leave tier 1 open. We even wrote it into our rules for a certain amount of time. And so I think that this will be once again, a temporary pause while we try and kind of get our feet under us once again. I think about who the most impacted parties are. Certainly the legacy operators that have not gotten a license yet. But this has been kind of this law passed in 2020. This is now kind of 4 years that there's been an opportunity to kind of jump in. I think about consumers and the just general health of the market. The competition of a open market will continue to drive down prices and continue to drive and improve quality, which is a direct benefit to consumers. Given that we're about to enter this post-harvest supply shock, I'm not as concerned about those doing significant damage to our market or to consumers while we kind of just reevaluate the kind of overall supply and demand. But then we have the same issue when you think about impacted parties, about businesses that have an application that are actively in the pipeline. And what are we going to do about that? Is 30 days enough? Should there be 2 deadlines, 30 days for getting an application in versus kind of a longer runway for dealing with applications that are already in the pipeline? So again, the numbers here are, we have 14 businesses, cultivation, that have submitted applications and are somewhere in the pipeline. It looks like only 7 of those 14 have been actively engaging with licensing. The other ones have kind of grown stale. There are 27 others that are either going through or have completed pre-qualification. And it takes us, and this will be on a slide later, approximately 67 days from the time of initial submission till approval for a cultivation application. So again, if we decide to close the application window after 30 days, anyone who applies, from here until that 30-day window is going to get approved. We just don't have, 67 days is the average time. It's just going to take too long, but maybe we want to consider a longer runway for the people that already have an application in.
So the one thing that I don't believe, and I could be corrected, that those numbers don't take into account is the seasonal closure of outdoor cultivators, because you can't go through pre-qualification. Everything's locked until I believe November 1st. And so we don't have a good handle other than qualitative. Folks have reached out to understand what prospective outdoor cultivators there would be. And I mean, if we think about 30 days from now, that's six days before this 30-day window would close. But I want to point to one other thing, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong by Gabe or anybody else here. Our rules require that we open licensing for 30 days a year before February 1st for small cultivators. So even throughout this pause, there will be an opportunity for small cultivators to seek an application from hypothetically January 1st to January 31st if we didn't make any other tweaks to what we're talking about now. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of the rule, yeah.
That makes me question the value of pausing tier 1.
Yeah.
Right. Like why close it for such a short period of time? I mean, it's the entry point to the market. It's the, in the spirit of the statute of bringing people in from the legacy market, it seems like we could leave tier 1 open and it wouldn't necessarily impact the numbers that we want to look at in terms of market saturation and market flow.
I also wonder if it's appropriate to do that simply from a staff perspective. If folks only have 30 days, and I think licensing had asked us to extend that initial window from December 1st to November 1st to give themselves more time and allow folks to get their license all the way through before things need to happen in the spring. It might be less of a burden internally if we leave small cultivation open, recognizing we've got to open it in January regardless.
Because if we're not closing it until October, I mean, you're really just 2 months away from having to open it.
Yeah.
Anyway, having to reopen it anyway. I'm not sure I'm not a staff person. I don't have to do that part of this, but it would be good to know if that's actually valuable to spend the time to close things down, put things off, and then reopen it again.
Well, I'm certainly open to it. I mean, I think when we closed tiers 3 and 4, part of that conversation and part of the conversation around the moratorium was starting to limit our application windows to just a single month out of the year for cultivation, so that the people getting in could look at kind of what the market looked like in the prior year and decide whether there was capacity on their own, whether they had something to offer this market or if it was saturated or not. So, I mean, I am open either way, but I do think that there is some value to closing it now, letting that kind of post-harvest rush come, and then opening it in January or February. It says no later than February 1st, I think. Okay. Yeah. So it could be.
It's not by February. It's no later.
It's no later than February 1st. So we have to open it for a minimum of 30 days. And then opening it either January, February.
We have to give 30 days notice before we open it.
Yeah.
So we'd either have to do that in December or January, right? Okay.
So we feel strongly one way or the other on leaving tier 1 open.
I'm just wondering at this point from an internal, I want to look over at my licensing director. I'm wondering internally what's the path of least resistance from if everybody's applying. I don't know how many people everybody is, but if it's only open for 30 days and there's a lot of back and forth and you've got to hit a good faith application where nothing is in your control, it's out of your control. Like, what does that look like from a staff bandwidth perspective? And maybe Olga, I can turn to you.
But we've never done it this way. I mean, it would be interesting. I think we might have to think about it if we are closing retailers and we have some work to do there, and then trying to work through some of their maybe tier 2 cultivation applications because we are talking about tier 1, just leaving that open, right? So we will have folks who are in tier 2 trying to hit that deadline, and then you can expect maybe a flood of those who are in tier 1 or maybe fearful that the pause is coming, not maybe next month, but the months after. And we have an influx of those who thought maybe we'll wait, but now we're not. So I could see the capacity of the licensing team being stretched thin, because then we also have a regular renewals and manufacturers and wholesalers needing attention. So it will be a complicating factor if we have a lot going on, for lack of a better word, and have different tiers going through different experiences. So,
Okay.
not sure if it's helpful, but
I mean, I agree with you. I'd love to get to a cadence of licensing. I think that's the most equitable thing to do, because then, regardless of your resources, you can make a plan a year out and build your resources and build your plan. It just seems really close for the tier one, for the timeline when we're going to reopen it, but I'm hearing your thoughts too.
Well, is there any more want to talk about the retail side of things?
I liked your proposal about 30 days, 30, like closing it for 30 days, but then a longer runway for the people who are really significantly actively working with completion, towards completion.
Yeah. So we can't stop new people from applying. I'm just trying to be transparent with everyone that anyone who comes in today is with a new application. It's very likely not going to be able to get licensed before, no matter how long. I mean, unless we make that runway,
I assume,
months and months and months.
sorry to interrupt, but we don't have the same rules around pre-qual that we do around actual licensing, right? So we could stop accepting pre-qualifications for retail.
If you're an existing licensing, you kind of bypass pre-qual.
That I know, but like someone who's new to the system wouldn't start a pre-qual today or tomorrow or.
well, my understanding is
You're saying turn off pre-qual
today.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
but then they still have the right technically to go through the full application. Legally, because pre-qual is not.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the pre-qualification system is a separate thing.
Yeah.
So having an application in process there is not the same as having applied.
Right.
There may be a lot to recommend leaving it open so that in the interim, people who want to prepare and work toward that pre-qualification certification can do that while the actual application window is closed. And that way, when it reopens, you have a much smoother path both for your applicants and administratively for the licensing division. But it is necessary at some point to define what completion means in a way that would prevent unfair placeholding behavior by people that just want to push the button and say, I have a foot in the door and now I'll take forever. And in general, when we've asked ourselves, as we do every time, there are renewal applications that are coming up on a deadline. What does completion mean? It really means having supplied all of the information and documentation necessary for the board to make a favorable decision on the day the application is made. And I think, there are principles applied at renewal that if a third party is the holdup, if you've done everything within your it is necessary to be fair to people to have a very consistent line about basically what complete means so that you don't have just feet in the door.
That to me seems like a reasonable line of completion. Like they've done everything they can as an applicant and they're waiting on somebody else.
So on the retail, it would be, we're going to vote to close the application process 30 days from today and allow, and then we're going to allow complete applications through, to be considered through November 15th, which is the Friday before the November board meeting. We can use the same definition of completeness that we use for, application renewals or what you just described. Is that fair? Is that workable?
Yes, you really just need the definition and the date for sure. And I think people at least have a fair understanding of what needs to be done.
So we're going to give the 30-day notice for closing down new applications coming in. But for the applications that are in the pipeline, they're going to have an additional, 20 days to get to completion.
We can see who already is in an active full application situation and notify them that they'll be on the 50-day marker. Like we can see who's the date of who's in there right now.
Yeah. And I think any communication that goes out to people that come in within the next 30 days, any new application should be like very unlikely. You can take a shot at it, but very unlikely that you'll get to approval before the 15th.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to confirm, we are not closing the pre-qualification process because it also has a 30-day requirement if we are to make any changes.
Yep.
But I think our understanding is that can stay open. So anybody who comes in and wants to get pre-qualified, they could work with our licensing team and achieve that during.
Yeah, I was thinking out loud. I retract
And they
my.
can hit the ground running whenever that we do lift the pause.
Yeah, so that gives folks who are thinking about it.
Do you have a motion for retail?
I think I do. Well, I'll take a stab at this and then there might be a friendly amendment to be had. I move that the board give 30 days warning of impending closure of the application period acceptance for retail and give 51 days or till November 15th for those who have taken all the necessary steps for completion of their application. And that we further revisit the closure when we have location and siting rules consistent with the new section 881A5F.
There a second?
I will second.
So the only, I don't think we'd be bound by that date. What I don't want is for us to have the lifting of this pause to be contingent upon us having promulgated the rules, because there are ways to delay rulemaking that would potentially delay our ability to reopen this.
Well, it's just that we would revisit it.
Okay. Yeah.
We can revisit and do nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we could do it before the rules are
Right.
finally promulgated.
Right.
But are kind of on the
Right.
path.
It's just, it requires us to have, to think about it,
Yes.
to have this conversation again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then on cultivation, I mean, I'm fine with leaving open tier 1. I really am. I like a tier 1 does much less kind of overall harm to the kind of the saturation question than tier 2s, any of the other license types. So I don't mind doing it. We, in our rules, as everyone has alluded to now, we did not want us or some future board to close licensing for cultivation indefinitely. The legislature can always do it to us, but we did not want to do that. We wrote it into our rules that every year we would cultivate at least tier 1 cultivators.
And as part of our rule updates, there should be some language on how you can either, because we've got this authority now to either graduate a tier or relinquish canopy based on what you're actually doing at your facility. So my point is for those that don't want to start at tier 1, you still have an opportunity to get there eventually.
Right.
Although I am hearing that having people of the same license type on different schedules might be challenging.
What do you mean?
Well, I thought that what I was hearing was that if there were cultivators having different experiences, and maybe I misunderstood you, Olga, but if there were cultivators on who have different tiers that are having different deadlines and different closings, that might be a challenge. Maybe I misunderstood what you were sharing.
No, I think I was saying that if we had for our licensing team, if now we are looking at cultivators, 2 subsets, and some of the folks are already working for tier 2s and are in the application process, and we are working closely with them and trying to help themselves get to the approval before the 15th. And then we have tier ones who don't have that urgency, may have different urgencies. So they're working through their own different processes. And we have an influx of them because they may have some fears that during the October meeting, the board decides to close tier one, for example. And so all I'm saying is some hypotheticals where different people may hear this. And now that we have a door open for cultivator tier ones, there just might be a little more volume of work, I think, for our team. All just throwing it out there.
So my only, well, not my only thought. One of my thoughts is obviously tier one outdoor, and I believe tier one mixed is only open from November 1st to like March 1st-ish.
Something like that.
I just want to make sure mixed was in that category as well as outdoor. Indoors rolling. I know we want to keep things open because we've got to open things in early 2025, regardless, because of our rules. Do we want to say after X date, you know, do we want to give tier one indoor an opportunity to kind of go until the outdoor is no longer accepted, to kind of get them on that kind of schedule? Or are we just going to leave tier one open rolling? Does that make sense?
I'm not following.
So right now you could apply for a tier one indoor license at any point throughout the year.
Yep.
You can only apply for outdoor or mixed at a finite part of the year.
Yep.
If we vote to leave tier one open today, right now for the next month and a half-ish, you can still apply for a tier one indoor. You'd be able to apply for a tier one mix or outdoor starting November 1st until March 1st. But then in April, you can still apply for a tier one indoor. Do we want to address tier one indoor through a motion today? If we were going to close that, we came in with the working under the agenda item that we would close tier one indoor. Do we want to sync it with tier one outdoor and tier one mixed, or do we want to leave that alone for now and keep it rolling past when those folks would no longer be able to apply for a license application? Does that make sense?
So
I follow you now. Yeah.
I think what you're saying is that the motion would be to pause the application process for tier one indoor starting March 1st, or whenever the date is that we close the application window for indoor.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's what I think it's worth our conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's what I'm proposing. I'm interested in that conversation.
Yeah.
Because if we don't do that and we don't do anything else, because we don't, depending on the RFP and so many factors determines when we're going to reopen certain license types from a cultivation perspective. Without that, and throughout that process, tier one indoor could still be licensed as the only cultivation option past March 1st. Right. And do we
Right.
care? Do we want that? Do we not want that? I think it's worth, or else we're going to have to address that at a
Right.
later date, and maybe that's more appropriate. I just wanted to make sure we're all flowing in the same direction from a voting perspective. If we're going to vote to kind of leave tier one open right now and not do this, it's closing and then we're going to reopen it for 30 days, and then, you know, my from what I heard from Olga, that just sounds like another layer of arguably confusion for both the community and bandwidth for staff if we're doing all that on top of renewals and new license types for wholesale and manufacturing. And it seems cleaner to just do it in one fell swoop. But how do we want the back end of that to look after March 1st or whatever that date is for closing new outdoor applications?
Yeah, I mean, I've always disliked, I mean, I know why we close the outdoor and mixed tier. I know the rationale, but I've always disliked that decision encourages indoor cultivation. So yeah, I mean, I think if we got this far and thought about doing a total pause, like doing the pause from March, you know, when all the other tiers close, when all the other license types close, on the cultivation side, I mean, I'm certainly fine with that. So we're not inadvertently encouraging people to go outdoors that may have wanted to, or indoors
You're right.
that may have wanted to go outdoors.
I think that makes sense for right now as we further consider saturation and what different scenarios through the RFP process are going to look like.
So I just want to make sure I'm following this. We would leave tier one open and vote to close it in March? Or would we revisit the conversation in March?
I think what I'm proposing is that we leave it open and the opportunity to apply for an outdoor and mixed license would open in November, and all three of those small tier one license types would be open until we no longer accept outdoor or mixed applications to sync tier one indoor with the tier one outdoor and tier one mixed.
I don't know that I want to vote on personally something that's that far in advance.
Okay.
But I agree with leaving it open. The end result is still the same, right? It still remains open for this period of time.
Okay.
We just do it in the.
Yep, it was
January,
just
February.
it's just a thought bubble
Yeah.
because those are not on the same path from a licensing perspective. And if we're only leaving them open, I didn't want us to not at least acknowledge that those two kind of pathways are different for getting licensure.
Yeah, I mean, we are by not doing a pause on cultivation, we are leaving ourselves vulnerable to the legislature doing it to us. I just want to remind folks of that. I mean, there's no guarantee about anything that they do, but I do feel like we've heard it in almost every public meeting we've ever had from cultivators that this market's oversaturated. We can't sell our product. There's just no, like the market is too lopsided, too supply heavy. And if those same people go to their legislators, then, as they did last year, and, I don't know if we should necessarily make decisions on this kind of like three-dimensional chess game with what the legislature may or may not do. But I just wanted to flag it as we're leaving ourselves vulnerable to that happening to us. And then we have no ability to open or close it or ratchet it up or ratchet it down. And the reason why I really didn't like the legislature doing it is, last year we saw flooding that knocked out, I think 12,000 square feet of canopy. There's any number of kind of factors outside of our control, whether it's disease, rot, whatever else, that we're not going to have a full, clear picture. And it's helpful for us to leave this in our hands. They can be more responsive than a part-time legislature.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, as you know.
We have to open unless we take it out of our roles, which I don't think any of us want to do.
No.
And they wouldn't even be finalized before February 1st. Like, we're going to have to reopen again, and we just got to inform the legislature of the reasoning why.
Yeah.
But theoretically, then there could be a bill that passes before that time that puts a moratorium, and that would overrule our rules, would it not?
It would overrule our rules, yes. Well, I mean, I think that we can certainly make a strong argument that, we're evaluating the size of this market. We don't want to do fundamental harm to the basic structure while we're evaluating it.
And as we heard through commenting, if there was an intent from a legislative perspective around cultivation, leaving small cultivator license types open would be in line with that.
Yeah, I think you and I are arguing different sides of the same bill, right? Being able to control the market, but then also we know that the legislative intent was to bring as many people from the illicit market, and they gave special consideration to small cultivators. So it would be an interesting legislative decision for them, I think.
I mean, what they were saying last year is all of those legacy operators had essentially 3 years to get in the market, and now the conditions have changed.
Yeah, although that's wishful thinking that somebody would be like that. It means that they have to be an early adopter, and not everybody is an early adopter.
Not everybody who's currently in the market is well positioned to be there or guaranteed to be there next year. I think, is another consideration. We heard that today. So I'd be in favor of just leaving small cultivators cultivation open and closing everything else. And if we have to have those tough conversations, we can have those tough conversations.
Do we want to close mixed tier one? Because that's essentially 2,000 square feet. So, I mean, it's just a consideration. I mean, I think we had this kind of thought early on that the indoor portion could be some supplemental income during the wintering months, but really it was also kind of, you've got your clones in there, you got to keep your genetics in there, and they're kind of replenishing your outdoor harvest and you're maintaining that during the winter. And now we have a propagator license. So do we really need that mixed here? Is it really serving an important function?
I don't know.
I think we leave it open and we can continue to ratchet if we feel like we need to in the coming months.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion on this?
No.
Is there a motion around, I think it would be just indefinite closure on tier 2 indoor and outdoor.
Yes.
Tier 1 mixed is still, is the only mixed option open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in a rule, right? It says the board shall accept applications for tiers 1 and 2, both on indoor and outdoor cultivation times for no less than 30 days each calendar year. Right? So I think, are we trying to still close 2s and then plan to reopen for 30 days later?
I think that's where we're at, all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just.
I think I just need, if I have like the citation for how we're allowed to do this.
Sure. So you could just warn the you could move to warn the impending closure of cultivation tiers 1 and 2. Noting the board's obligation, Rule 1.10D, to reopen those tiers for at specified times. And I guess your intention is to push it back as far as possible, make it February.
Yeah.
So it's a simple way to do that.
Okay.
Sorry. The motion, long meeting. The motion, I think, a motion that would make sense would be one to warn, to give 30 days warning of the impending closure of cultivation tiers 1 and 2, acknowledging that the board will be obligated to reopen those tiers under its Rule 1.10D on February 1st. Does that?
Yes. So again, I'm going to try this and we'll see if there needs to be a friendly amendment. I move that the board give 30 days warning of the impending closure of cultivation tiers 1 and 2, noting that the board is obligated to reopen those per Rule 1.10 on or before February 1st.
So we are closing 1 and 2 until.
Well,
until
I've moved that we would close 1 and 2, and then if it's seconded, we would either vote yes or no to do that. If that motion fails, then we would vote on a different motion.
You could also take a motion to amend the motion on the table.
That's that. Yeah, you could take.
If somebody wanted to play with it, I mean, I lost track of it.
Yeah.
Well, I can second just to continue conversation. I'm just a little confused because I thought the motion was going to be leaving small cultivators open.
That is what we've discussed.
Okay.
But you can also amend the motion, I believe.
Sorry, I think I spit out the road bit. So the motion would be to for basically a friendly amendment to remove small cultivators from the.
I will move to amend to remove small cultivators from the motion.
Is there a second? Okay, so now the motion is
to warn the impending closure of tier 2 cultivation, noting that the board will be obligated to reopen tier 2 outdoor per 1.10 on or before February 1st. Is that correct?
Indoor and
Indoor and outdoor on or before February 1st.
All right. Any last thoughts? All
I need
right.
a second. Did we second that motion
I
already?
think
you did.
I think we
Okay.
seconded it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you seconded the amendment and then just kind of read it back to
Okay.
us. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks for going through that with me. Sorry. Next on the agenda is a packaging discussion. So I just want to say we heard consistently at the 3 licensing roundtables we conducted last month that there needs to be more packaging options, that the expense and the availability and the limited variety of non-plastic packaging is having the effect of keeping otherwise permitted products out of the market. That was not our intention with our packaging regulations. Kyle, because of his professional background, unfortunately drew the short straw when it came to evaluating the environmental claims that these packaging companies were making and deciding which types of polymers would meet our environmental considerations that we've articulated over and over again. So after those roundtables concluded, we decided that we would reopen the conversation about what could qualify as acceptable packaging. And Kyle, once again, I'm hoping you might be able to lead us through some of your thoughts on where to kind of start that conversation.
Thank you, Pepper, and thanks to everyone listening, sticking with us through this. Really, we haven't done one of these long meetings in a while, so it's testing all of our stamina. But I especially want to thank our manufacturing community and those that have followed the intention and spirit of our regulations. We know it isn't always easy and adds more complexity to your business. For 3 years together, we have attempted to figure out where plastic is truly necessary, what de minimis plastic means for this market, where we can divide the want from the need. When does a want become a need? And even more so when only a handful of packaging companies work in a direction we have been trying to move towards. Some have not been successful at bringing new products to the packaging market that require, some packaging companies, have not been successful bringing new packaging vessels that require CR certification as we had hoped, and we had heard from some companies in the year 2024. As Pepper alluded to, we've heard across many public meetings and private one-on-one conversations how challenging child-resistant zero plastic packaging is to source, afford, and so on. Often global logistics and backlogged slow response times from packaging companies can compound these issues. It has never been lost on us, and it still isn't lost on us as an agency. And environmental policy and sustainability are a complicated system of trade-offs. What can you sacrifice in the short term to arrive where you hope to in the long term? How can we maintain our vision and goals for as little plastic as possible and still hope those struggling for consistent, reliable, and affordable options? Lately, the CCB has re-engaged the Department of Environmental Conservation's solid waste program leads to understand what would likely be the best direction for us if we were to make more accommodations and options for those that need CR packaging. Please be mindful that these are the very folks who helped craft language and instituted the plastic bag ban statewide, much of which our plastic definition pulls from. After a back and forth, especially in educating how nuanced packaging in the cannabis context is and can be, agency partners agree that some form of high percentage PCR plastic is likely our best way forward. Some recycled polymers are advantageous for recyclers and may seek them out in sorting at facilities where otherwise they wouldn't seek any plastic that would otherwise go towards a landfill. We wanted to share today that we are interested in going in that direction, and restructuring of our waiver system is imminent. We had hoped to announce actual options today, but we need to have a couple more conversations and we'll likely adjust things in the coming weeks. This likely means at least a handful of PCR bag options, medicinal screw top options, and others that require child-resistant packaging. We agree that the zero plastic language may have us overlooking some other good sustainable options that may be more available or at a different price and MOQ point. We're less inclined at this moment in time to move the needle right now for the flower market, as it doesn't require child resistance. But of course, we will always go through the waiver process should it meet the spirit of what we have been trying to accomplish and somebody submits one of those waivers. Our regulations, whether you like them or not, have diverted thousands of pounds of plastic from our one single landfill in Vermont. Some might point out that even so, we have added even more glass to that landfill. But hey, glass is inert when it gets there. It can be crushed and not emit any greenhouse gases to our atmosphere, effluent to our waterways, or permit problematic forever chemicals and put more strain on our waste system and neighboring communities. That is something I think we can all take pride in. And even when more accommodations are made, remember that we have created something different here. I hope we can continue to take pride in how this market looks, vastly different than any other market out there from a packaging perspective. And while restrictive in a sense, creativity is bred from restriction. I do not want the whole market in cheap Mylar bags, no matter the PCR percentage. And I hope no one wants to see us become that. This is a slightly new direction we are all going to move in, but I want everyone to be cognizant of what we've created together. I understand the perspective of some who haven't been as supportive of this direction from the onset, and that's okay. But for me, credit is given where credit is due. And thank you to everyone, willing or not, who has worked through the spirit of our regulations and shown how cannabis can be packaged differently than the outgrowth of initial state legislation that occurred over a decade ago. So all of this is to say, there's going to be a lot more options for folks moving forward. We're still going to maintain the spirit of our regulation and work through waivers that look at more percentages of PCR for the manufacturing community, provide more screw top lid options other than just the one Humidico option. Should have a couple bags too, and really take a good hard look at how we can best make sure that you can find reliable, affordable packaging moving forward. I hope that we can maintain the spirit of what we've been trying to accomplish and continue to move forward as leaders in the packaging space.
And I really appreciate those comments. I mean, the decision to not allow single-use plastic was a board decision. We all decided to do that. We all kind of thought that that was the right move. You, unfortunately, because of your background and, have the heightened ability to kind of judge the claims that these companies are making and understand the polymers that they're using and kind of really, so you've been taking the brunt of the kind of
it's okay.
animosity.
We all take our brunts in various ways. And again, for me, understanding global supply chains and understanding global environmental impact has to be overlaid with how our waste system in Vermont functions. We don't have industrial composting. Pepper and I, just so everybody knows, we pounded the table for a PHA oriented bag that was child resistant, and we were told, whether or not we were naive to believe so or not, that option would be available in 2024, and we held out hope that would happen. Now that is not a reality, we hear you loud and clear. We need more options, and they're, depending on how you skin the cat from a sustainability perspective and an environmental perspective and what you are trying to accomplish, there are other options that we can explore out there, and we intend to do so.
So how do you want this? So I think, we're not going to change our rules around this, because I think in our rules, we knew that under extreme hardship, we'd allow de minimis plastic, certain levels of plastic through a waiver process. We don't actually have to change anything in our rules to accommodate this shift. Curious how you might want the support of the industry in bringing forward options. And I know that you have started looking at specific options and you have a few in mind.
I've had a lot of conversations. Some of them need to be cleaned up a little bit. I kind of know, I think, where we want to go. And this is just a signal that we want to see at least a 40% PCR percentage in a product that's coming our way. What we hope to do is provide some specific directions towards specific companies that we think meet the spirit of our regulations and what we hope to accomplish with sustainable packaging, and still provide a pathway if you find a product that you think has a 40% or higher PCR content. The problem, especially with bags, is these are very hard things to verify. There are so many materials that go into a plastic bag, and a lot of it's easy to fake. It's so easy to fake, and maybe somebody gets through our waiver system and then they see Vermont's pulling them in a direction and they make a business decision to go to a new manufacturer or supplier because it's cheaper. but then the environmental benefit falls out the bottom. I think we're trying to avoid a lot of the trappings of claims that the wholesale market makes by keeping the PCR percentage around 40%. We can go higher, and I encourage folks to go higher, but the higher PCR percentage that you get, the more costly things get. And PCR stands for post-consumer recycled content. So this is often your milk jugs that are melted down and reformulated into a different option. Ocean plastic, reclaimed ocean plastic is a part of this conversation too. And there are some companies where you can go, just like our inventory tracking or other more sophisticated inventory tracking programs, where you can actually look at where that ocean plastic is coming from, where it pulls into port, what its carbon footprint is, the transportation sector too. So, I'm hoping that moving in a PCR direction for manufactured products just puts more options on the table. And, I've never really felt good about one company having effective control of screw top lids here. It's more about the polymer and, what promise that specific polymer provides to the market. And we thought we could get this market there. And this is us realizing that these things take time. And as we continue to have conversations with other states about directions for cannabis packaging, we recognize that our manufacturing sector should not be caught up in that crossfire. So it's an opportunity to give folks more clarity and options as they look for better MOQs, better price points, while still trying to maintain what we all hope can be a sustainable packaging, environment here. And if you go to other markets like Michigan, Connecticut, everything's in a Mylar bag. Some of that is regulatory imposition based off of not wanting any label creativity on your package. Others it's the cheapest price point, and that is certainly a consideration for your business. But I think it's really cool that most vape carts are in cardboard here. You don't see that everywhere. That's just one example. I know some folks have felt that we forced products off of shelves because of the packaging regulations. As Pepper alluded to, that was never its intent. There's this push and pull of innovation between, is putting cannabis into everything innovative? I don't necessarily know if that's innovative, but I don't think there was ever a promise that you could put cannabis into every possible thing you could think of when we kind of created this market together. But I think we recognize that some products that are fan favorites out there maybe deserve this type of accommodation. So again, there will be a lot more information coming in the coming weeks. This is not a carte blanche to go out and order anything right now. Please give us the availability to kind of put more information together for you, and we will do an email blast out to the manufacturing community once we've kind of restructured the waiver program and given you a little bit more clarity.
Thank you for taking all that on and
it's
leaning
all
into
good.
your knowledge. Well, and then also educating, like, particularly me or the rest of us about it.
Again, I know not everybody agrees. Everybody's got different perspectives. And when you get really into certain life cycle analysis of different inputs, it gets really, really complicated. It's easy to think of the low-hanging fruit and transportation and how heavy glass is. And I really don't want to debate the environmental impacts in this meeting. I just, everything comes from China. The screen that folks are looking at us through was manufactured in China. So how can we, understand global logistics and supply chain management while also making sure that folks have, sustainable, and again, sustainability, that's a word that means something different to everybody. I think we have made it clear what we think sustainability is in this market, and that's moving away from, at this point, virgin plastics, which are plastics that are entering the market for the first time. And, acknowledging that there are other options that have a lot of value out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, just as far as people submitting waivers, your advice would be to hold off.
We're gonna put out some specific waivers for folks to give them a head start, to give you an opportunity to see what we're thinking. And then again, we're not limiting it necessarily to just those companies. If you have the magic bullet, it kind of subscribes to a similar line of thinking, a similar PCR percentage, deals with similar wholesale manufacturers. We will consider that and look to verify things through the waiver program. So please, this is coming. This is imminent. This is happening. It'll happen before the next board meeting. We're going to work to kind of, in the midst of everything else we're doing, to kind of give folks that clarity and that head start into what this kind of new packaging options for manufactured products looks like. And again, we are not intending to touch the flower market at this point. But again, if you think you have waivers that kind of go to what like I saw a doob tube today that was made of PHA. Does that belong in our market? We can have that conversation. PHA is what the community code is made of for those that are not familiar. Should that be in the market? We can have that conversation. Yeah. But this isn't a carte blanche for flower too. I don't want to see all flower in bags, personally. But again, child resistant, zero packaging or zero plastic packaging is extremely difficult. I don't need to tell folks that are listening that point. They know it firsthand. Appreciate everybody's comments and appreciate everybody's participation. Like, I get asked by other state regulators, how did you accomplish that? And I always say, because whether or not they support it, our community and our licensees have gone above and beyond from a creativity perspective to find solutions where otherwise they didn't think that they had it.
Yeah. Well, so the basic kind of the takeaways, the high level takeaways that we're thinking about is only for products that require child resistance. We want to focus the need that we heard the most are bags and screw top lids, and they need to be a minimum 40% PCR, and they need to be from a company that we can verify that they're not making false claims.
That's our starting point. And so feel free to do some research. Just please do not try and put anything through the registration system. I'm happy to field emails, calls. If you think you've found something that's cool, let's talk about it. And in the meantime, we're going to work to give you those examples of what we're thinking and how we can still maintain this sustainable packaging mission in a slightly restructured or reimagined way.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Olga, Executive Director report.
Sure.
You ready for that?
So ready for it. I'll try to make it as quick as I can.
Oh, yeah.
If I could please.
Sure. While you're pulling it up, I'm just going to get some water.
Probably need a second too. Oh. I know I'm not the most right fan.
Start without me. I'll be right back.
All right, let me see if I can do it again. Then, I think I was gonna say it's here. Plugging in.
We should just take a break till at least one of these people comes back.
Yeah.
I'm all right, all good.
Yeah, like I said. So.
Sorry, my computer died.
Same here.
Well, that's mine almost, but I felt that I really needed to.
All right. You want to get started? I think Julie said
go
that was
for it. All right. Here's our September executive director. So let's dive right in. A quick update on our outreach initiatives. So some of you might have attended our Cultivation Best Practices peer networking event. It was earlier this week. It was on drying and storing. Again, anyone who missed that discussion or would like to revisit any of our prior peer networking events, please go to our website and you can get a link to our YouTube channel there. We are working on the next month's peer networking event, and we expect that to be on the product registration and labeling. Stay tuned for the date and time. Patrick will announce that in one of our upcoming newsletters. So it will be sometime in October. Moving on our adult use licensing data as of September 16th. And the first slide here is a look at our current active licenses. In the past, we've only looked on the current months, at the current month's data. But now that we've changed things around a bit, we can look at the trends. So you're looking at the 3 months worth of data, July, August, and September. And you could probably see that we're at 564 active licenses as of September 16th. Interestingly enough, we were at 564 in July. We went down to 560 in August and back to 564. So the numbers are tracking steady with some changes to specific types. You could probably see based on the numbers that fewer cultivators, and we've gained some manufacturers and retailers over the last couple of months, 3 months. Next, here, we'll look at a few priority status slides. The first one is a familiar slide. Our active licensees through the lens of their priority status. Numbers are steady, with economic empowerment and social equity numbers growing ever so slowly and slightly, and our standard category sort of being consistent at around 60%. So nothing too much here, but we take a look at another slide here. And again, to build on the prior slide, you're now looking closer at the 3 months worth of data. And here you could see, right, if you look at the first set of blocks, colored blocks, that's the month of July. So our blue category, our social equity numbers are actually have grown a little bit. We're at 95, up from 88 last month. Economic empowerment gained a point each month, and standard numbers are just a little showing a downward trend month over month. And I do have one more slide on this. And again, another priority status related slide that shows our licensees based on their priority status and license type. Again, not surprisingly here, our standard licensees, they're depicted in orange, remain the majority of all licensed community across all license types. Yeah. That is our priority status slides. Okay. And again, moving on, if no questions. So that's the slide on our active cultivator licensees. Again, we are looking at 3 months worth of data here, allowing you to see changes month over month. Green color is our July numbers. Yellow is August, and orange is September. So if you look closer here, the most noticeable changes are in tier 1 mixed category, that we see a drop in outdoor as well. And as expected, we've seen an increase in tier 1 indoor over the last couple of months. Not much change in other tiers. 1 point percentages in tier 1, tier 2s across all three tier 2s months over months. Okay. I'll move on. Here's a closer look at our issued cultivator licenses as our numbers stand currently. So you could see 141 indoor, 98 mixed, 144 outdoor. So if you put that in percentages, we are hovering around 37-38% each for indoor, outdoor, and about 25% of our community is mixed. So again, you could take a closer look at this slide later now, sure. But it's all here. Okay, I'll just keep on going then.
All right.
Okay, our manufacturers are represented in this slide. Again, 3 months worth of data. And September is in bright orange. So you're looking at 84 active manufacturing licenses. We've added a license each in tier 1 and tier 2. Okay. That's that. And here is a slide that I think the chair already referenced, and this is showing the timeline for applications, the processing. So it's based on a small subset of licensees, mostly focused on this month's a cohort that's up for the board's approval. So as you could sort of see here, the average timeline for this licensees is the pre-qualification process on average takes between 30 and 40 days. That's the sort of yellow-orange color. And it's broken down by 3 types of licensees. A little bit faster, our retailers were able to get through their pre-qual, and then additional 43 days it took our manufacturers to get through the licensing process, and 67 days for the cultivators and 75 for their retailers. So again, the total number of days from the beginning through the license issue, assuming these folks receive licenses today, license approved today, is over 100 days for cultivators and retailers, and slightly faster for the manufacturers. So again, that's a new slide here. Okay, I'm moving on to the next familiar slide, our licensed canopy capacity square footage data. We are at 924,500 total, which is just slightly less than last month's by a couple thousand. And we're seeing a slight increase in the indoor capacity, and our outdoor capacity dropped by about 12,000 square feet. Yeah, month over month. Yep. Another look here at the licensed canopy capacity versus oat utilization. Again, we get those numbers from our compliance team. And as a reminder to everybody here, we calculate numbers here based on our compliance team surveying 15% of our cultivation licensees to assess the percentage of their licensed canopy that is being utilized. And then we use those numbers to forecast how much of the total licensed canopy is being utilized. So if we just think percentages, the current utilization rate for outdoor is around 76%. It's roughly 51% for indoor. Now we'll look at the retail slides. As a reminder here, only the towns with 2 or more retail locations or applications in the queue are represented here. So the latest totals are 86 licensed retail stores, or 89 if we include the integrated folks. Again, we've seen a consistent gain in the number of applications in the queue. And we are actually up to 14 in September. I know you mentioned 9, but that was last week numbers, okay. And we are at 14 actually as of now. So yeah, that's what we are looking at. Again, no surprise again, Burlington, Morrisville, Montpelier, Rutland have the highest concentrations of application of retailers and also applications in a queue. So all 4 of these towns currently have new applications pending. So that's this. Another quick retail slide that's just by the county. You know, no, again, pretty something you could expect between Chittenden, Rutland, Windsor counties. We have the majority of our licensees in these areas. So again, just a quick look at this slide.
It's interesting that other than Chittenden County, it's mostly like southern Vermont, really.
Yeah. Windsor, you got all those New Hampshire border
Yeah.
towns. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's a good point. All right, and I do have a new sort of final new slide here on retail, sort of has a historical angle a little bit. So you will see here, so from the inception of the program, the first column, issued retail, and then we're including integrated and also listing retailers that cease their operations. And so far, we've seen only 2 businesses who went out of business over the last 2 years. So again, 89 is our total if you include retailers and integrated. All right, so that is all on the sort of that part of the presentation, and we'll look at our usual subset of product registration. Only a few slides here. So again, snapshot of time at new registrations in blue and renewals in green, and you're looking at specific products. So first it's seeds, clones, and topicals. So proportions vary, but of course new registrations continue to outnumber renewals at this time. And then let me see. So another slide, that's the second slide on another subset of products. So concentrates, edibles, and vape cartridges here. Again, we're just collecting this data and we'll keep monitoring to see and understand the prevalence of different products in the marketplace as we go through the months and years. And one more here on infused flower and pre-rolls and tinctures. Again, you could look at the data here. And I have final slide is just on flower and pre-roll registrations and renewals. Again, snapshot of time here, and flower is where it's at in terms of the numbers. Okay.
Great.
So that's it for this part, and we are on to the compliance and enforcement data. So summary of the work of our compliance and enforcement team. So 104 inspections and 14 active investigations reported for September. As you can see here, our cultivators have seen the most visits from our team. Retail community have seen 20. And we'll look, we'll see some additional color on the work of the compliance team in the next few slides. So I'll just move on. And here's a slide on compliance inspections. So again, it's 104 for the month of September. And again, we are offering here 3 months worth of data, so you could see any trends. And just looking at it here, we could see that our team has been very busy this month. In every category, the numbers are higher than in prior months. It was only, I looked back, 79 total inspections last month, and it's 104. So team has been very busy on inspections, and then investigations, sort of similar. We again have 14 active investigations, 5 involving cultivators, 6 retail, and 3 that impact our manufacturing licensees. So again, dark red is September data. Right, and one more slide here. That is a further breakdown on the compliance team's activities. So 25 new complaints were reported and processed, 9 cessations of operation, 2 notices of violations, 4 letters of warning, and 5 product destructions for the months. A lot going on here, and I'll give you the final chart here that sort of digs further into the types of violations that have been reported to or observed by our compliance team. A wide range of topics. As you could tell, with advertising, licensing, and product-specific complaints being the most common types received in the last months, but a wide variety. Good.
Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap for the compliance data, and on to the medical program data. So I have 2 slides here. This slide has the medical program patient and caregiver data for the last 12 months, so September through September. We're actually keeping relatively steady with our caregiver numbers if you look at the last 6 months. So back in January, we were at 122, and we are currently at 122. But of course, the patients' numbers continue to decline steadily. And I will give you one more slide here, and that is a new slide, a quick year-over-year look at the patient and caregiver data. Now that we have about 3 years worth of data, pink shows our patient numbers and yellow is caregiver. So no surprises here, but a little cleaner slide. And that's it for the report. And we are on to the staff recommendations. And again, as always, we'll start with staff recommendations for initial licenses. And then we'll do we'll show the list of our license renewals. And there's some late renewal applications for your consideration as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. If anybody had any questions.
No, I know that a lot of work goes into this. I just, sorry I didn't ask more questions.
That's good. I feel like it was good.
Thank you for all of the thorough data.
Yeah.
Of course. All right. So I'm going to go into so there are 2 slides here for our initial licensees that are recommended by the staff. So slide 1. I'll move on to the second slide. It's just 1.
Note for the people that joined via phone, there's a lot of people. So Olga's not reading through them, but these will be posted to our website.
I wasn't sure if we want to do a motion now or we'll go through everything and then go back.
Okay. I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the listed applications issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I will second. Any discussion? Any questions?
Nope.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So I'm moving on. So, there is one more slide here. So this business is actually up for their natural license renewal, and they have fully met their renewal applications, but we're bringing them now to, again, address an administrative oversight. Internal audit conducted by the licensing division after the last month's board meeting uncovered that this business was administratively complete and ready for review in the previous meeting, but was mistakenly left off the agenda. So they're included here now to correct that oversight.
Great. All right. Is there a motion to approve this?
I move that the board adopt this recommendation to approve this application issuance subject to any final payment of required fees and other contingencies.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Okay. All right. So now we are on to license renewals, and we do have 3 slides here. So I'll leave this one first. Next. Second slide. And one more. That's all of them.
Great. Is there a motion to approve these?
I move that the board adopt the recommendations to approve the listed renewals, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and so here's the list of our late renewal applications for the board review. We have 2 slides here. So again, under the rule 1.15.1D, all of these businesses have supplied all of the required documentation and have also included their explanation letters for their untimely filings. The letters have been shared with the board in advance of this meeting. Our staff recommends that the board accept and approve these late renewals. And I have 2 slides here. That's the first one. That's the second.
All right. Is there a motion to approve these?
Pursuant to Rule 1.15.1, I move that the board act favorably on the request of applicants listed to have their renewal applications accepted late, and that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the applications, issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And I have one more slide. So 4 businesses here. So these establishments have all filed explanations for their untimely filings under the rule 115.1DI, but some elements required for renewal are still missing. Consequently, the board cannot approve the renewal applications at this meeting. Under the subdivision D, D, the board has discretion to accept the incomplete applications and continue the existing license for a short period of time to allow the renewal process to be completed. We recommend that for each applicant, the board should determine whether the late filing should be accepted, and if it is, how long to continue the existing license.
Okay.
Here, if I could add a detail about the 3, I was asked to have a look at all 3 and or all 4, I'm sorry, to see if they were, categorized in a way the board could act favorably upon under its rule 1.15.1. Businesses get into this category if they have a late application and there's some impediment, legal impediment to the board acting favorably upon their application, even though the application is made in a true sense. A very typical instance of that would be if there's a tax issue. The board is prohibited by section 3113 of the tax title from actually issuing the renewed license, but you can continue it while things are worked out under your own rule 1. On the other hand, if someone submits an application, what is nominally an application that is missing multiple elements, so that it really just represents pressing submit, but not having any of the required content, the board can exercise its discretion under 1.15.1 to decline to accept the late application once somebody has exceeded the deadline. Looking at these, the first 3 of which you have access to in your systems do appear to fit credibly in that category. The 4th of the 4, however, didn't offer really any of the required content. It's not as though anybody's waiting on anything, it just isn't there. So my recommendation to you would be that you can continue the first 3 consistent with your rule. There probably is not a sound basis to accept the 4th.
You're talking about the right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think you are not.
I had them in a different.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the outlier, and I'm sorry for scaring whoever that is at Simple Vermont. It's actually the second applicant, Momark Farms. It was in a different order last time I saw that list. But the Momark Farms application doesn't appear to be a complete application. It's fit for acceptance, whereas the other 3 are. And I apologize for not looking at that before saying.
So I mean, I agree with you. I read the explanation letter, and I had a hard time following it or even understanding whether this person wants to be in the industry or not, and did not submit almost anything that we are looking for, and didn't really seem to have an excuse or a plan to kind of submit those documents. So I would agree with your assessment. The only thing that kind of leans me in the other direction is this is a tier 3 cultivator. Tier 3 is no longer available. I've always felt confident that someone who doesn't get licensed, we can do a cessation of operations and then allow them to reapply at a future date. This person couldn't do that. So I wonder if we do give them the same, I guess, call it benefit of the doubt, I guess, to give them a certain number of days to make an attempt. But I do think, just based upon the amount of missing documentation and the explanation for why that documentation was missing, leads me to believe that that would be stringing this person along, and they actually probably are not going to make that deadline at all. Or even if they want to, it sounds to me like they might be thinking about relinquishing the license already.
The motion we typically make is to continue the licenses in this scenario in force until the next regular meeting. So what I'm gathering you're saying is that you don't think that person would even be able to collect those documents by October 30th.
I don't think so. And this, like Gabe said, these are not things that are outside of this person's control. They are well within this person's control. They let things like bank accounts and insurance lapse. They kind of question the need for them also. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of an odd situation where they really have nothing that we asked for. It's not like they're just missing something like a tax document that they're working with the tax department to get, or mm-hmm. they're working to resolve something with CSI or something along those lines. This is just it was hardly an attempt, it feels like, to kind of making a completion. Okay. Agreed. So I don't know. I could go either way. We could give this person the 30 days that I assume that we'll give the other 3. Or we could just kind of say this wasn't really a good faith effort at a renewal application.
So I'd be inclined to make a motion to continue the 3 that we understand are waiting on documents and not include the one that we've been concerned about.
Yeah. Does that give this person an appeal right?
No, the license would just expire.
Okay.
Where there's really nothing to, if you submitted materials and said, well, we have to deny the application, that would be sort of a decision of the board. In this case, there's a failure to make a timely and sufficient application. The license could be revived in the sense that the successful late application could be made, but there's going to be a period where it lapses.
Right. Yep. And it's my understanding from the letter that there's no actual products being grown right now.
That's fortunate because it ends a crisis of possession.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so we only have to act on the 3. We don't have to act on the 4th. They're just by just kind of.
I think because the person has submitted the request letter, it would make sense to have a motion to deny it and just decide it if that's where you're going. You could accept it and continue it, but it'd be hard to explain.
Could we do a motion to approve the 3 and then a motion to deny? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Is that I move that pursuant to Rule 1.15.1, I move that the board accept the late application and continue the licenses in force for Sky High Cannabis, First Light Flowers, and Simple Vermont until the regular meeting of October 30th, while the board awaits documentation from other agencies confirming the applicant may be licensed pursuant to 32 VSA 3.11.3. B, and defer the decision on application until our next meeting.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, do you have a motion to deny the request to continue?
Yes, I move that the board deny the request to continue Momark Farms based on staff recommendation.
Yeah, and I guess technically it'd be a motion to decline to accept the late application, so it's no longer required.
Friendly amendment, I move to, totally lost my train of thought.
If the decline
I
to
move
accept
to
the late
decline to
application.
accept the late application of Momark Farms.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
No.
No. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Okay. Olga, my computer's dead. I'm assume that that's the end of the agenda.
That is the,
Okay.
the agenda, and I think we are all good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for all of the comments today. I know that that decision did not make anyone happy. It's usually kind of where we find ourselves. But really appreciate the kind of thoughtfulness of everyone kind of giving us something to think about. And we'll just keep marching along, and I will adjourn this meeting.
Thanks all.
Thank you.